When my grandfather passed away, I never expected to inherit the estate that had been in our family for generations. The sprawling mansion, the endless gardens, the legacy. Suddenly it was all mine. But what shocked me the most wasn't the inheritance itself. It was him, the gardener, the man who had worked these grounds with his bare hands, whose quiet presence carried more strength than I'd ever seen in anyone. His eyes lingered too long on mine. His words carried a weight I couldn't ignore, and little by little, I realized he wasn't just caring for the roses and the ivy climbing the walls. He was carefully, silently caring for me. But there's something I discovered that changes everything. Something hidden beneath the beauty of those gardens. A truth that ties us together in ways I never could have imagined. And once I found it, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. Before I tell you how a forbidden romance blossomed in the shadows of a mansion and why one secret nearly destroyed it all, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and turn on notifications. Because this story will show you how love can grow in the most unexpected places, and why truth always finds its way to the surface. The day I arrived at the estate, the air was heavy with silence, the kind of silence that comes after too many people have whispered behind closed doors. My grandfather's death had left the mansion empty of its usual authority, and though the property was now legally mine, I felt like a stranger walking into a life that wasn't really meant for me. The marble floors echoed under my shoes, portraits of stern ancestors stared down, and the smell of damp earth floated in from the gardens. I remember standing by the tall windows of the library, looking out at the sprawling grounds. The gardens seemed endless, winding paths, sculpted hedges, fountains whispering in the distance. That was when I saw him. He was bent over the soil near a bed of roses, his sleeves rolled up, forearms taut as he worked the earth. His dark hair fell forward, hiding part of his face, but even from where I stood, there was something striking about him. Later that afternoon, we crossed paths. He emerged from the garden shed carrying a crate of tools. His shirt clung to his back from the heat, and when he noticed me standing there, he paused. "You must be the new master of the house," he said, his voice calm, but edged with something unreadable. "I suppose I am," I answered awkwardly, "but I'm still figuring out what that means." He set the crate down and wiped his hands on a rag tucked into his waistband. "I'm Daniel," he said simply. "I've taken care of these gardens since I was 16. Your grandfather trusted me to keep them alive." There was pride in his words, but also a distance, like he wanted me to know that he was rooted here, that I was the one intruding. I nodded, unsure what else to say, and he gave me a long, unreadable look before returning to his work. Over the next few days, I found myself drifting outside more often than I wanted to admit. The house felt suffocating with its locked rooms and shadows of the past, while the gardens breathed life. And where there were gardens, there was Daniel. One morning, I approached him as he was trimming ivy climbing up the stone walls. "You seem to know every corner of this place," I said. He smirked slightly. "I should. I've spent half my life here." I hesitated before asking, "And what did you think of my grandfather?" Daniel Shears paused mid-snip. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, "He was a man who believed in tradition above all else. Sometimes that made him respected. Other times, feared." He glanced at me then, his eyes dark and piercing. "He would have expected you to keep things the way they've always been." That expectation weighed on me like chains. I had no idea how to run an estate, let alone live up to a legacy built on rules I barely understood. And yet, Daniel's voice carried no judgment, just quiet truth. I began to seek him out, even when I told myself not to. We'd talk between his tasks, conversations that slipped from small observations into deeper confessions. He spoke about his love for the soil, how every season told a story, how patience was the only way to earn beauty from the earth. I found myself listening not just to his words, but to the cadence of his voice, the strength in his silences. One evening, just as the sun began to set, I walked into the orchard and found him perched on a ladder, gathering ripe apples. He looked down at me and grinned. "Care to help? Or are you just going to stand there in your fine clothes and watch?" I laughed and reached up to catch the fruit he tossed down. Our fingers brushed once, accidentally, and I felt a jolt that startled me. He must have noticed, because he lingered on the ladder longer than necessary, eyes meeting mine in a way that made the air between us heavy. That night, lying in the enormous bed that still smelled faintly of my grandfather's cologne, I couldn't stop thinking about Daniel, about the way his laugh softened his strong features, about how he moved with quiet certainty, about how his presence made the vast estate feel less lonely. But there was something else, a detail I couldn't shake. Earlier, while we were stacking the apples into baskets, I had noticed a scar that ran along his wrist, faint but deliberate, like it had a history. He caught me staring and quickly covered it, changing the subject. It left me restless, wondering what parts of Daniel's life I didn't know, what secrets were buried here alongside the roses and ivy. The following day, as I explored the west wing of the house, I stumbled into a locked study. Inside, stacked neatly on the desk, were letters written in my grandfather's sharp handwriting. But the letters weren't addressed to business partners or family. They were addressed to Daniel, dozens of them. Notes about the estate, instructions for the gardens, but also words that felt personal, as if there was a bond between them I had never imagined. Why would my grandfather have written so many letters to the gardener, and why had Daniel never mentioned them? That night, I confronted him. I carried one of the letters into the garden, where he was watering rows of lavender. "Daniel," I said, holding it out, "I found these. Why didn't you tell me about this?" He froze, water dripping from the can, his jaw tightening. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked genuinely unsettled. His eyes flicked from the letter to my face, and I saw a storm brewing there. "Because," he said finally, his voice low, "some truths are better left buried in the soil." The weight of his words hung between us, leaving me breathless. What could my grandfather have written that Daniel wanted to keep hidden? And, more importantly, how did those secrets tie us together? At that moment, I realized this inheritance wasn't just about the mansion or the land. It was about Daniel, and a history I was only beginning to uncover, and I couldn't help but ask myself, had I inherited more than just an estate? The morning after Daniel's unsettling words, I woke with the letter still clenched in my hand. Sleep had been elusive, haunted by questions I wasn't ready to ask. The mansion, despite its grandeur, felt like a trap, its hallways whispering secrets I didn't yet understand. The silence was broken only by the faint sound of birds in the garden, and I knew where Daniel would be. I found him by the fountain, pruning vines that had begun to climb too far up the stone. His shirt was damp from the mist, and the sunlight caught on the scar I'd noticed before, a faint line trailing across his wrist. When he realized I was watching, he lowered his arm quickly, almost defensively. "Daniel," I said, my voice sharper than I intended, "you can't just say something like you did last night and expect me to let it go." He continued trimming, avoiding my gaze. "And what do you expect me to say?" "The truth," I pressed. "Why would my grandfather write to you like this? What was your connection to him?" Finally, he set the shears aside and turned toward me. His eyes, dark and steady, held no amusement. "Your grandfather was a man of control. He didn't just rule this estate, he ruled the people in it. He had expectations of me, expectations I never asked for. Those letters, they were reminders of duties, of debts I didn't owe but couldn't refuse." "Debts," I repeated. Daniel nodded. "He gave me this job when I was young, but it wasn't kindness. It was because he thought he could mold me, make me serve this house the way he wanted. And in some ways, he succeeded." His jaw tightened. "But I never belonged to him, no matter what he believed." I tried to process his words, but they only raised more questions. "Then why stay? Why dedicate half your life here if he treated you like that?" For the first time, his expression softened. Because of the gardens. Because they became mine in a way he could never understand. Every flower I planted, every hedge I shaped, it was my escape. My rebellion was turning this land into something beautiful, even if he thought it was all for him. There was a quiet defiance in his voice, and I felt a strange surge of admiration. But beneath it I could sense there was more. That scar, those letters, they hinted at a history far darker than he was admitting. Later that day, I wandered through the mansion again, unable to resist the pull of unanswered questions. In the library, I searched through drawers, finding more letters hidden among old account books. They weren't cruel, but they were suffocating, demanding reports about every detail of the gardens, notes about discipline, even instructions on how Daniel should conduct himself when dealing with guests. It was as though my grandfather had wanted to own Daniel's very identity. When I returned outside, Daniel caught me holding the papers. His face darkened. "You shouldn't be digging into this, and why not?" I shot back. "If my inheritance comes with secrets, I have the right to know them." He stepped closer, his voice low. "Because some things will change how you see me, and I'm not sure you're ready for that." The way he looked at me then made my chest tighten. It wasn't just defensiveness, it was fear. Fear that whatever truth he carried might drive me away. That night the estate was hit by a storm. Rain lashed against the windows, thunder rattled the walls, and the gardens outside were swallowed by shadows. I found myself pacing in my room, restless. Something about Daniel's words, his silence, his guardedness, I couldn't let it go. When the storm eased slightly, I ventured out, drawn by instinct more than reason. The gardens were drenched, the air thick with the scent of wet earth. I spotted a flicker of light coming from the old greenhouse. Pushing the door open, I found Daniel inside, kneeling by a bed of orchids, his lantern casting long shadows. He looked up at me, startled. "You shouldn't be out here in this weather." "Neither should you," I countered. "What are you doing?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "These flowers are fragile. If the storm damaged them, I needed to see if they'd survive." I stepped closer, the air thick with humidity. "Daniel, why do you keep pushing me away when all I want is to understand?" His shoulders tensed. "Because understanding comes with a price. Your grandfather made sure of that." I crouched beside him, refusing to let the moment pass. "Then let me pay it. I'm not him. I don't want to control you. I want to know who you are." For the first time, the walls around him seemed to crack. He let out a long breath and glanced at me. "Who I am is someone your grandfather tried to break. And maybe he did in some ways. But when I look at you—" He stopped himself, shaking his head. My pulse raced. "When you look at me, what?" The silence that followed was louder than the storm outside. Finally he whispered, "I see a chance for something different." Before I could reply, a crash of thunder shook the greenhouse, the glass panes trembling. A large branch from a nearby tree snapped and slammed into the roof. Shards of glass rained down around us. Instinctively, Daniel grabbed me, pulling me close, shielding me with his body as the lantern fell and the light went out. We stayed frozen, breathless in the dark, the storm howling outside. His arms around me were strong, protective, and for a moment all I could feel was his heartbeat against mine. When the noise settled, he didn't move. Neither did I. The air between us was charged, fragile, yet undeniable. Then finally he released me, stepping back, his face unreadable in the shadows. "You need to decide," he said, his voice rough. "If you really want to know who I am, or if you'd rather keep seeing me as the gardener your grandfather left behind." His words cut through me, leaving me trembling with more than fear. It wasn't just about the estate anymore. It was about us, and I knew the next choice I made would change everything. The storm had passed, but its echo lingered in me long after the rain stopped. The greenhouse lay in ruins, shards of glass scattered across the floor, broken vines dripping with water. Yet what haunted me wasn't the destruction. It was Daniel's arms around me, the way he'd shielded me as though I was something worth protecting. That memory pulsed in my chest, making it harder to breathe. The next morning, I found him outside, already clearing the debris. His shirt clung to his skin, damp with sweat, and his hands bore small cuts from the glass. I hesitated, watching him work with quiet determination. He didn't look up, didn't acknowledge me at first, as though last night hadn't happened. "Daniel," I began softly, stepping closer. "Are you hurt?" He brushed dirt from his palms and finally met my gaze. "Nothing I can't handle." "That's not what I asked." He smirked faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "You worry too easily." I swallowed the words I wanted to say, that it wasn't just worry, it was something deeper, something I was still afraid to name. Instead, I picked up a rake and joined him. For a while, we worked in silence, side by side. The air was heavy with damp earth and unspoken thoughts. When we finally paused, I leaned against the broken frame of the greenhouse. "Last night," I said carefully, "you didn't just protect me. You said something, that when you look at me, you see a chance for something different." "What did you mean?" His shoulders stiffened. He turned away, focusing on a pile of broken branches. "I shouldn't have said that. Why not?" I pressed. "Because you're not ready." His voice was firm, but beneath it, I could hear the tremor of fear. "Let me decide what I'm ready for." He turned back to me then, his eyes burning with a mix of frustration and longing. "Do you really want the truth? Fine. Your grandfather didn't just control me with orders. He used me. He knew I had nowhere else to go, and he kept me here with promises, with threats, with chains you couldn't see. And when he looked at me, he saw property, not a man." The words struck like lightning. "Daniel!" "I stayed because I found something here worth saving," he continued, his voice low. "These gardens, this land, they were mine in spirit even if he claimed them. And now you inherit it all, without knowing the price others paid." I felt sick, guilty, angry all at once. "I didn't know," I whispered. "I know you didn't. That's why I never told you. But now," his gaze softened, "now I don't know if keeping silent protects you or hurts you." The vulnerability in his voice shattered something inside me. For so long I had seen him as steady, unbreakable. But here he was, raw and unguarded, and it made me want to step closer, to close the distance between us. Instead, I asked the question that burned on my tongue. "And when you look at me now, do you still see that chance? Even knowing I'm tied to him by blood?" He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yes, but it scares me. Because wanting you feels like betraying everything I endured under this roof. And yet, it feels like the only thing that makes me free." The silence that followed was unbearable. My heart pounded as I took a step forward. "Then maybe we're both afraid of the same thing." Before he could respond, the sound of tires crunching on gravel shattered the moment. We both turned to see a sleek black car pulling up the drive. A man in a sharp suit stepped out, carrying a briefcase. His expression was cold, official. "Mr. Harrington?" he called out, my name slicing through the air. "Yes?" I replied cautiously. "I represent the estate board. There are some matters we need to discuss about your grandfather's will, privately." His eyes flicked toward Daniel, dismissing him as though he were invisible. Daniel's jaw tightened. He wiped his hands and stepped back, retreating toward the fountain without a word. Inside the mansion, the man spread documents across the table. "Your grandfather left conditions. Clauses that affect not just the property, but those who've served here." He tapped a page. "One in particular involves Mr. Daniel Clark." My stomach dropped. "What about him?" "He is to remain employed here indefinitely, his position secure unless terminated by the heir, you." The man's voice was clinical. "In other words, his presence is not optional. Your grandfather ensured he would never leave these grounds unless you chose it." The room spun. Daniel's chains hadn't ended with my grandfather's death. They had only been passed to me. When the man left, I stumbled outside, clutching the papers. Daniel was still by the fountain, wiping sweat from his brow. He looked up as I approached, and something in my expression made him still. "What is it?" he asked. I handed him the papers, my voice hoarse. "You were right. He bound you here, even after death. Unless I release you, you can't leave." Daniel read the clause, his hand shaking slightly. Then he let out a bitter laugh. "So even in the grave he finds ways to own me." I stepped closer, desperate. "But I'm not him. I don't want to own you. I want you to choose stay or go. On your terms. His eyes searched mine, torn between hope and fear. And if I chose to stay, would it be because of the land or because of you? The question hit me like a strike to the chest. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Because the truth was tangled in both, the gardens, the estate, the bond we were building. Before I could answer, he stepped back, putting distance between us. Think about what you really want, Harrington. Not what your grandfather left you. Not what this house expects. You! His voice cracked on the word. Because until you know that, I can't risk giving you what I already know I feel. Then he turned, walking into the shadow of the trees, leaving me trembling with the weight of everything unsaid. I stood there, staring after him, the papers clutched in my hand. His confession, his chains, his unspoken love, they were all mine to carry now, and I had no idea if I was strong enough to bear it. The night after Daniel walked away, I barely slept. The house felt hollow, every room echoing with the weight of my grandfather's will. I sat at the oak desk in the study, the claws about Daniel staring back at me like a curse. It wasn't just land and money I had inherited. It was his chains, his silence, his shadow. By morning, I couldn't stay inside. I found myself wandering through the gardens, the air still heavy from yesterday's storm. Daniel was there, of course, tending to the roses with methodical care. His shirt sleeves were rolled, revealing scars on his forearms, small, pale lines that hinted at years of labor and pain I hadn't noticed before. He didn't look at me as I approached. "You should eat something," he said flatly, like we hadn't shared everything in the rain the night before. "I'm not hungry," I answered, stopping a few feet away. "Daniel, we need to talk." He clipped a rose stem and finally turned to me. "I said enough yesterday." "Not for me," I pressed. "I read the will. I saw what he did. But I need you to understand, whatever hold he thought he had over you, it ends with me." He let out a humorless laugh. "You don't get it. These things don't just end. A man like him doesn't die quietly. His power lingers." I shook my head. "Not if we fight it." Daniel's eyes flickered with something, hope, maybe, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "And what if fighting it means losing everything? The land, the house, your inheritance? Would you still stand there and promise me freedom then?" The question caught me off guard. Would I? I wanted to say yes without hesitation, but the truth gnawed at me. This house wasn't just bricks and gardens. It was legacy, identity, history. But looking at him, the answer came clearer than I expected. Yes, I'd give it up. Because none of it matters if it keeps you bound. For a moment, he seemed to believe me. His lips parted, like he wanted to say something. But then the sound of footsteps echoed across the gravel. We both turned to see a group of men in dark suits approaching from the drive. At the front was the same man from yesterday, the estate representative. But this time he wasn't alone. Behind him walked two others, their expressions grim. "Mr. Harrington," the man called, "we have an urgent matter to discuss." I stepped forward, uneasy. "What now?" He adjusted his tie, his eyes darting briefly toward Daniel. "There have been questions raised about your capacity to manage the estate. Allegations, to be precise." My stomach dropped. "Allegations of what?" "That you are entangled with staff in ways unbecoming of the Harrington legacy." His tone was icy, deliberate. "These claims have reached the board. They could impact your rights as heir." My face burned. I glanced at Daniel, who stood frozen, jaw clenched. "That's absurd," I snapped. "Who told you that?" He gave a thin smile. "Word spreads quickly when houses like this change hands. Neighbors talk. Old loyalties dehart. We'll need to investigate further, of course." Daniel took a step forward, his voice low but steady. "You're using him, just like his grandfather used me. Haven't you done enough?" The man's eyes narrowed. "Careful, Clark. You forget your place. I couldn't take it anymore. Now you forget yours. Daniel isn't property, and I won't let you treat him that way." My voice cracked, but I didn't care. The men exchanged glances, one muttering something under his breath. The representative simply adjusted his papers. "Very well. Then you'll have to prove it. The board will review your claim to the estate. In the meantime, any questionable associations will only weaken your position. With that, they turned and left, the crunch of their footsteps fading until the car disappeared down the drive. Silence fell heavy. Daniel exhaled slowly, his hands tightening around the shears. "You just painted a target on your back." "Let them come," I said, though my voice trembled. "I'm not afraid, but the truth was I was terrified. I could lose everything and not just the estate. If the board suspected my feelings for Daniel, they wouldn't stop until they destroyed both of us." Daniel dropped the shears and faced me fully. "Don't do this for me. Don't throw away your life, your family's name. I'm not worth that." "Yes, you are," I said fiercely. "More than you know." His eyes softened, the fight in them faltering. For the first time, he stepped closer willingly. "You don't understand what it means to live under chains for so long. Freedom is terrifying, because you don't know if you'll be strong enough to keep it." I reached for him, my hand brushing his arm. "Then let's be terrified together." The touch lingered, sending shivers through me. For a moment the world fell away, the board, the estate, the accusations. It was just us, suspended in the fragile silence of possibility. But then Daniel pulled back, shaking his head. "We can't, not like this, not when they're watching us." He turned and walked toward the stables, leaving me standing among the roses. My heart pounding in the space he left behind, I stared at the broken greenhouse in the distance, at the estate that felt more like a cage with every passing day. The storm had changed something in both of us, but now the real battle loomed, the fight against those who would rather see Daniel remain a shadow than ever let him shine. And I knew one thing: I wasn't ready to let him slip away. Not again. The question was, how much was I willing to risk to hold on to him? The last week in the estate had felt like a war. Rumors spread like wildfire, letters arrived from the board threatening hearings, and whispers filled the town about the new heir tangled with the help. Every gaze carried judgment. Every sound of footsteps in the hall reminded me that I was being watched. But through all the noise, one truth burned in me brighter than any inheritance: Daniel. I hadn't seen him for 2 days. He avoided me, busying himself in the stables or wandering beyond the grounds. The emptiness left me restless, pacing the corridors at night, replaying our conversations, the storm, the touch of his hand. I couldn't lose him, not to fear, not to the shadow of my grandfather. On the 3rd morning I found him by the greenhouse, repairing the broken glass panels from the storm. His shirt clung with sweat, his hands raw from the work. He didn't look up when I approached. "Daniel," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. He kept working. "You shouldn't be here." "People already talk enough." "Let them," I replied. "I don't care anymore." At that he paused. Slowly, he set down the pane of glass and finally met my eyes. His expression was weary, guarded. "You say that now. But when they take everything, when they strip this house, this land, the name, you'll regret it." "No," I said firmly, stepping closer. "The only thing I'll regret is not telling you the truth." He tilted his head, searching me. "And what truth is that?" "That I love you," I said, the words rushing out like I'd been holding them for a lifetime. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it would break through my ribs. "I don't care about the estate or the board or my grandfather's ghost. I care about you, and if you walk away now, I'll lose the only thing that's ever felt real." His breath hitched. For a long moment, silence stretched between us, broken only by the creak of the greenhouse frame. Then he whispered, almost disbelieving, "You can't mean that." "I do," I insisted, stepping closer still. Every word. His hands trembled as he lifted them, as if fighting himself. "Do you know what you're saying? To love me means giving up everything you've ever known. No legacy, no approval. Just us, against all of them." "Then let it be us," I said. "That's all I want." The fight in his eyes shattered. He'd let out a breath that sounded like release, like years of chains breaking. And then, finally, he closed the distance between us. His lips pressed to mine with a force that stole the air from my lungs. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, hungry, like two souls colliding after being kept apart for far too long. When we pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine. "I've wanted this for so long," he admitted, his voice raw. "But I was afraid. Afraid of what it would cost you. Afraid of believing I deserved it." I cupped his face, forcing him to meet my gaze. You do deserve it. You deserve everything. For the first time he smiled, not the practiced, guarded smile he gave the world, but something real, fragile, beautiful. And in that smile I saw freedom, but the moment didn't last. From across the field, a voice called out sharply, "Mr. Harrington!" We turned to see two men in suits striding toward us, the same representatives from before. My chest tightened, but I didn't let go of Daniel's hand. Not this time. One of the men stopped a few feet away, his gaze dropping deliberately to our joined hands. "So it's true," he said coldly. "You've compromised yourself. This will not go well for you." I squared my shoulders. "Then let it not go well." "I won't live in fear anymore," the man sneered. "You'll lose everything." "Then I lose everything," I shot back, tightening my grip on Daniel. "Because I'd rather lose it all than lose him." The words hung in the air, bold and unshakable. The men exchanged a look, clearly unsettled by my defiance. Finally, one muttered, "We'll see what the board decides," before they turned and left. The tension drained from me all at once, leaving my knees weak. Daniel caught me, his arms strong around me. "You just declared war on them," he said softly. "Maybe," I admitted. "But I also declared love for you, and that matters more." He kissed my temple, pulling me close. "Then whatever comes, we face it together." And for the first time since stepping into my grandfather's estate, I felt like I wasn't alone. That evening, we sat on the porch as the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky painted with streaks of gold and crimson. The house loomed behind us, heavy with history and expectation, but for once it didn't feel like a prison. It felt like a place where something new could begin. Daniel leaned against me, his voice quiet. "Do you really think we can survive this?" I looked at him, at the scars and strength etched into his face, at the tenderness he tried so hard to hide. "I don't just think it," I said. "I know it. Because love like this doesn't come twice." He exhaled, finally allowing himself to rest against me. And as the last light of day faded, I knew the future would be hard, maybe brutal. But it was ours, and that made every risk worth it. Love had broken the silence. Love had shattered the chains. And in that moment, beneath the weight of legacy and the whispers of the world, love was enough. If this story touched your heart, ask yourself, how often do we let fear, judgment, or tradition silence what we truly feel? Love takes courage, and sometimes the bravest choice is choosing the person who makes your soul feel alive, no matter the cost. Now I want to hear from you. Would you risk it all for love? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story of courage, passion, and discovery. Share this with someone who believes love is worth fighting for, because in the end, real love isn't about what you inherit, it's about what you choose.